Okay, hello, good morning. Mm, so we just put the youngest one in his nap, and I have 45 minutes, and I have a small scope, hopefully, that we're gonna try to implement. We actually had this feature previously, but after we implemented workspace IDs, so that each team have their own VMs and stuff, there was a lot of complexity related to that. So we had to kind of re-implement the endpoint for opening a branch to deal with that, and we kind of reduced the scope or the features that we had for that endpoint to make sure that we were able to handle that complexity. But now that we do, it's a good opportunity to go back and re-implement it, because we don't have any specific use cases. And I'm actually not sure if we might actually have it. Maybe we should check that first. I'm not the only one working on this, and we have quite a bit of features, so it's hard to keep track of everything. So let's go and check that first. But my point is, we didn't really use it for anything specific, other than we were playing around with, for example, automatically creating branches on linear tickets. But in this case, we need it for our dev flow for Pitcher. So that from Pitcher, you can easily, when we work on Pitcher, we can easily just spawn a branch that's connected to the Pitcher instance you're developing on. Let's see. Let's search for create. Yeah, there's definitely no create flag here. Okay. Let's create a branch and see if we can figure this out. I also need to look at our stream graphical. I just need the docs here. Ooh, I guess this is... I guess it's query. Anyways, let's look at the code first. So there's a lot of stuff going into evaluating what happens when you open a branch. So what we're mostly curious about here is, let's see, I guess everything started. Okay, so if there is no branch in the URL, meaning that like you just go to the or we have to create yeah, so import read-only branch. This is related to GitHub. So yeah, ensure. So this is just a utility for now. Okay, so if there's no branch, we first try to infer an existing project. You might hit this URL with or without. Okay, so you might access this branch without the workspace ID. Well, sorry. So you might hit the URL without a branch and without workspace ID. So we need to figure out, is this repo actually part of one of your teams? And that's what we're doing here. And now the branch is null. So that means it evaluates by the default branch. And if it finds it, it should return it. Now the thing is, here we need another check. So at least here we have a create query. So there is some additional complexity now, because we can't just check if we have the create query. We also need to figure out which workspace we should actually create this on. So we do kind of have to infer the project first. So I guess it's more here. Okay. So yeah, so regardless, we actually have to go in and we have to kind of go and grab the default branch, even though we don't need it, because that's the same query that evaluates your team. So here, check if we have a create query, rather create a new branch. Yeah. So it will be something like if an infer project and we have the query, then we'll go ahead and we'll actually create one, and that's what we're going to return. And this is unrelated, but then we also have, and this is unrelated. Yeah. So where are we now? So this is if there's no branch. Okay, and then we go in and we have a branch now. And what we want to check, well, the real scope of this is actually only to deal with the scenario I just mentioned. So we could deal with that first, because you could also argue that, so for example, when we use linear, you actually had the ID of the linear ticket, and that became the branch name. So you would also be able to set the branch name and actually create that branch. But that's not critical for what we need it for right now. So I suggest we just go in and fix what we need first, and then we can look at actually presetting the branch you want to automatically create. So first we need to go and grab project query params. So let's just add this here. Create branch. And that will be get query param query create. And I guess we should just do this. Yes. Yeah, okay. So now we have project query param. So in this checkoff hours, so yeah, the question is, if we don't have an inferred project, it means that, yeah, you can't create a branch there. So we need to have an inferred project. So what we can do is if inferred project and project queries create branch, we'll do something else. And what we need to do, I need to check our mutations here. Isomorphic project, let's see, import branch, import infer. I don't think we actually have this query for creating a branch. And I think it's actually just, oh my God, the kids, it's actually amazing weather here today. So the kids are outside screaming and playing, which I guess is a lot of fun. If you're a kid, I prefer doing this. Let's see. I can't remember if, yeah, because we refactored this. Okay, so how would I go about creating a branch? I think it needs to be a mutation. So create branch, and in this case we have to give it a name. Okay, I'm actually not sure how we're going to do this, because now we actually need to give it a name, because we changed this as well during introduction of team-based VMs with the workspace ID. We changed these mutations as well. Which really means that we have to create a name, which is not ideal. Okay, so I guess we have to ask, backend about this, but it's definitely like create branch. What I'm also wondering here, because we can have an inferred project. Let's see, an inferred project. It needs to have, yeah, and there's a team there. So it needs to be part of. You can't create a branch without actually being part of a team. So what would happen here is, like, if for some reason you weren't signed in, for example, like this create wouldn't work. You have to be signed in for this to work, which is fine. Yeah, I'm just wondering what we're going to do about the name. Or not, depending on the usage level. Simulation example. Yeah. So I think what I'm gonna ask the backend team for is to make this name optional. The from is optional. Well, the from here would be the inferred project branch. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. No, wait, sorry, name. Yeah, this is optional. Sorry, I'm very confused by us using the term name, because name here actually points to the repo name, not the branch. So it is optional. Yeah, then this is going to work. I think actually we already have this create branch. Yeah, create branch query. Yeah, even create branch. So we should actually just be able to run this. Okay. So, convert project query to project. What I do wonder though, when we create this branch, what do we actually get back? Is it, I don't think it's an actual project, or is it? Let's see what happens. New branch. Come on, IntelliSense. Why are you not helping me? Create branch, args, and then we need the server head server. Where is it? Headers. What we have here is owner, repo, source branch would be inferred project branch, and workspace ID would be inferred project team.id. Why are you, oh, branch. Oh, it might not have a branch or null. What does that mean? How can that be without a branch? Or don't we have like default branch? Yeah, sorry, there we go. So this kind of, yeah, but this makes sense. This makes sense. We're going to use the default branch. And this new branch, we have to await it. Okay, is this like an infer project? Oh, no, it's not, right? So how would we do this? The response here isn't enough to. It kind of sucks that we have to go and grab it again, right? I do wonder though, what's like missing? Because we could grab this from the infer project. I would suspect. Resources, settings. Like this would be optimistic though to do this. So new branch, what does it really have? ID, name, contribution, pull requests. Is this showing? It's a little bit difficult with these. Contribution, yeah. I think we actually have the safest thing to, like, this is not a normal flow. So if it has some latency, it's perfectly fine. So what we would do here is that we'll create this branch and then we'll go and grab the project again. I do wonder though, project would be, what was the query for that? I think we have something called just, not import, but infer project, query projects with branch, that's something else. Get project by branch, that's the thing I'm looking for. Yeah, I think we just have to do that. Get project by branch. And the branch we want is new branch name, owner, we have repo, and workspace ID would be inferred project.teamid. And then we'll await that, and this should result in an actual project we can convert. Which is not true. Why isn't that true? Isn't this a project query? Oh, it might be null. Okay. So what do we like? I hate these kinds of scenarios because we just had a successful run at this logic, so we know that this is available. So the question is, what do we do if that fails? Should we throw? Yeah, I think we should, because that's kind of throw new error. Could not fetch created branch. Fetch project for created branch plus new branch name. Let's just do that. And it's still failing. Oh, wait, because we already, when we do get project by branch, we actually return a project. We don't just run the query. So we can actually just do this. I think this is going to work. Let's see, let's open in a new tab. Okay, let's see what happens. Let's see, and let's bring up the logs here first. Let's put them over here. Okay, so as I said, I need to be signed in. What was I going to try? Okay, so we are just going to okay, we're going to try without the workspace ID as well. So we're just going to say create equals true, and what should happen is that I'm going to get into a new branch. And it worked. Nice. You would think I actually prepared this, but I didn't. But it wasn't that complicated. But still, I think we don't really need this to be in the query. But we don't really care about that now. This is something we can rather... This has actually been quite a journey for me, like being part of... I've been at CodeSandbox almost 4 years now, and the mental... like how you think about stuff and how you think about implementations, like in all aspects of product development, really. Like I get very enthusiastic about opportunities and possibilities and so on. And I need to be very conscious to constrain myself. So in this case, like I was just about to, like my old self would just jump in and implement create for everything. But for me, it's been like I had to train myself to think that no, wait. The actual problem to solve right now is our development flow. And that only needs this implementation. And maybe that's, I think for some people that's very natural. For me, it hasn't been natural. And it's because of enthusiasm. It's not because yeah, it's not because you don't understand the situation of being like a startup and the importance of having that mindset, but it just sneaks up on you. And I think everyone kind of fails on that from time to time. Anyways, okay, so we're actually done now. I'm happy about this. As I said, we could like remove this create true after we've done it. What we can do though, we can test it with the workspace ID as well. Like I know it doesn't matter, but we can just test it. Cool. And that worked. So we are going to actually create the PR for this. Create new branch from GitHub in project import flow. Yeah, let's try again. Add the ability to create a new branch from inferred project. That's a good one. That's impressive, Boxy. Okay, let's create the PR. Okay, I didn't have an issue for this, so let's just add ability to use GitHub CodeSandbox test sandbox create equals true to immediately create a new branch, also being redirected to that branch. For now, we are using this for our picture dev flow, but we can use this for other situations as well. I did not implement the ability to choose your own branch name for now, but we can revisit this later. Let's put Evis on this because he worked on the picture dev side of things. Cool. I actually think that's good, and I have like 15 more minutes now to yeah, maybe we can play around with something the last 15 minutes, because I've been working on a little library. I haven't been able to build anything with it, but it's based on a lot of reflections and a lot of experience, and it would be super fun if someone actually tried to build something with it. So maybe, yeah, I can just show it off a little bit. I'll share this with Evis later. Okay, because I have something I was playing around with. That was on my personal. I guess it's that one. So it's a state management library. It's called Impact, because it's actually using. We can look at the counter. So it's actually using just classes to basically write state and logic for your application. And then under the hood, it uses a project from Microsoft called T-Syringe, which is dependency injection. And the point with this library is that you don't think about dependency injection or anything like that. It's more what it provides as a value. And the value is that where you previously, like using external state stores. So for example, I've been working on Cerebral and Overmind, and they're both like these trees of state and functionality. And what's difficult in that space or doing it that way is that you kind of have to create namespaces around parts of your tree to define what is this logic and state about, and what is this logic and state about. And these kinds of libraries, they don't support like holding private state. Like typically, maybe you start a subscription and you have a disposer from that subscription. Like, where do you store that disposer function? Like, do you store it in your state tree? Like, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's also not that straightforward to like hide like private logic, if that makes sense. At least in Overmind, it's not that straightforward. So it's really nice to have a tree structure, because when you have your IntelliSense, you can like dot into like the state tree or your actions tree. And you can like, with the IntelliSense, you can see all the state and all the actions available to you, which is amazing. But at the same time, they are tied into this tree, and it's not obvious what domains each part of the tree is about. Long story short, here, with this dependency injection under the hood, you can just define a class in isolation. So you don't need broad domains. You have very specific domains, very specific functionality. And you can define state there. You define its behavior. You have private. You're able to express what is private. And you can just use it in any component. And if you want one of these classes to use functionality from a different class, you can just inject it. And the way you would do that is just in the constructor, you just say what you want, and then you get it. But maybe I could show this better. Because I just made this example earlier just to verify that the current version works. And it's a little bit complex what we're seeing here as an introduction. Like, it's not complex, but as an introduction, it's complex. But we don't really have time to go into any of this, so... Okay, but I can just talk about what we're seeing here. So the point is that when you create these classes, you decorate them as a service. And what this basically just means is that when you mount your app, you add something called a service provider. And this allows any nested component to inject a service. And the way that is done is using the useService hook, and you point to the class. And so from the surface of the API, it's like very natural. Like, okay, you decorate a class as a service, you expose a service provider to your component tree. When a component uses a certain service, technically that service is injected into the service provider and being offered here, meaning that any other component part of the same tree as this service provider would get the same instance of that service, in this case the counter. But you don't really think about it technically, you just do it. And then that's the only thing this hook does. It just gives you the instance. And then there is this other hook called useSignals, which basically tracks access to signals in that class. So if we look at the counter, we can see that we have this private count, which is a signal. And there's nothing special about that signal. The only thing the decorator does, unlike, for example, MobX, is that it just makes it a getter-setter. There's no proxies or anything like that. It's very, very simple, which fits React better, because React really wants its state to be mutable, right? It doesn't want these mutable proxies. So that's the case here. And the complexity that was added here, that is that I consume it as a promise. And the reason I consume it as a promise is because React is talking a lot about native consumption of promises. And they have like a feature request kind of thing running. And they're talking about this special use hook. And basically what that use hook does is that it just takes a normal promise. But what React, at least from how I understand the documentation now, is that they're going to add a few properties to these promises to understand their state. Like, has it already been resolved? Or has it not been resolved yet? And so on. So what impact does is just polyfill that documented approach to the use hook. But I'm calling it use promise here to make it explicit. And the point is that when I deem this count as asynchronous, I call it, or I create something called a cached promise, or in this case, a fulfilled cached promise. And what it basically does is, yeah, I do wonder. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so what it basically does is that it creates a completely normal promise, which in this case is resolved to the value 0, but it adds these properties described by the React team to cache promises, so that React is able to synchronously consume this promise. And then I do the same here. I just replace that promise with a new fulfilled promise, which means that React will reconcile, it will read the promise synchronously, and it does a normal reconciliation. So as you can see, it works just fine. But the point is, like, this is a silly example, but the point is that whenever you expose something to React from this imperative object-oriented layer, you use signals and cache promises. So signals is just to consume state, and then cached promises is there to consume asynchronous values, right? And consuming these asynchronous values requires suspense and error boundaries, but it's just beautiful that you can just use promises directly in your components. You don't need to create all these effects around it and so on. Yeah, and that is basically the library. It's just allowing you to create normal classes, and then instead of like instantiating like a master class and you build up this tree where you're passing in instances down the tree because they depend on each other, and so on, you have this very flexible dependency injection under the hood, which, as I said, on the surface, you don't really think about it. You just create these classes, you decorate them as a service. In the constructor, I could say like constructor, if I had like an API class, I could say private API, and it would automatically just inject that and make it available here. And then in any component, you can use a service and consume it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And it's like, again, it's based on, at CodeSandbox, we write a lot of object-oriented code. So it was an exploration of finding a way for us to keep doing that also in our client applications, web applications, and making it more familiar and cohesive across all our code, but still take advantage of React fully, which I think this does. And it's like, compared to what we're doing now, where we're putting all our logic and all our state into React itself using React primitives, like this is insanely much more performant because you have full control on reconciliation and so on. And it doesn't like recreate, like I don't know how much impact that has on an application, but like, you know, with React's reconciliation, when you write hooks and stuff, like you're creating new functions and values every time it runs, right? When you use state and you put an object in there, every time that component reconciles, it does actually create a new object, but it's not used because the only object used is the initial object. So it's, yeah, it's very interesting. Like that's the biggest mental challenge for me with React, is that the component doesn't render once. Like solid.js makes a lot more sense to me because every component renders once, and then it renders out, and then you have these reactive hooks, and then that is what drives it further. Yeah. It's very interesting. Anyways. Anyways. Yeah, so I guess that's... I don't know if this made sense. But yeah, I'm looking for someone to actually try building something with it. So if you want, please give me a shout out, and then... I'm actually not on Twitter, am I? Well, I think I am. But yeah, anyways, you could tweet on at CodeSandbox, or yeah, you'll figure it out. Anyways, cool. We actually implemented something. That's great. And I got to talk about something completely unrelated to what we're doing, but I'm curious about, so that's fun. So yeah, I guess that's it. And we'll maybe we'll do something tomorrow. I'm actually working on something else as well, which is a bit more complex and interesting. It's about using the browser for running language servers to improve UX and resource usage for us. And we actually have a proof of concept of it. And we're actually using our own technology for it, Nodebox. And it's very, very interesting. And I'm basically kind of wrapping it up now. But there are some things, some reflections that needs to be resolved. So yeah, maybe that could be a good stream tomorrow. We'll see. Okay, bye for now.